on another page.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I'm starting the official recording, and then we're live. I'm just going to share it into the Facebook group, and then we'll be rocking and rolling here. So another 30 seconds, maybe 60.
This is a big turnout. What is there? Almost 20 people here.
And there's more than that registered. It's a popular topic here. See, and I was thinking maybe it won't be that popular because a lot of people are already kind of getting into Zapier, but then again, the reason I thought of doing it was because I thought there are a lot of people who actually say to me, you know, I haven't had a chance to get into Zapier yet. So more on that in a minute. Let me just finish here.
Hey, Heather Satterley filled the main stage, so.
Yeah, no, I'm sure.
They
Plus,
literally
it's a bit of an
moved.
addiction.
Yeah, it's an addiction. It is. Once you get, it's like you go down the rabbit hole.
I think between Zapier and Airtable, I'm like basically a junkie at this point.
The first step is admitting you have a problem, Seth.
I know.
I'll never admit it.
The first step is admitting there's a problem. There's a problem. All right, good morning, everybody. We're live. Happy Friday. It's November 15th, 2019. The year is going to be over in like a minute. We're almost done. It's almost Christmas, right? And then New Year's. Right? Thanksgiving is in a minute. Christmas is in 2 minutes, and New Year's is in 3 minutes. Basically. So
Wait a second. You said it was a minute till the year is over. If Thanksgiving is a minute.
I adjusted my timing. I adjusted my timeline.
Sorry, I'm bad at math. Okay.
That means your birthday month's almost over.
Speaking of being bad at math, yesterday I was arranging with somebody to schedule a call, and she was on the East Coast, and so I said, all right, so it'll be 1 o'clock my time, 3 o'clock yours, and she got back to me and said, actually 1 o'clock your time is 4 o'clock mine. It's 3 hours difference. I'm like, I actually knew that, but I'm really not good with numbers. That's why I use spreadsheets. So, speaking of which, if you haven't caught it already, make sure you go into the Between Wall and Main strategy group. Emily had posted a question about how to get sales information to see like who had sales with her, client company recently. And I put some screenshots up there because the default thinking is to go to a report, but actually if you go into the sales area of QBO and tap the export button there, you get really nice sales data. And then I explained that in about 30 seconds of cleaning it up and then another 30 seconds of creating a pivot table, you can very quickly group it by customer and within that by month and then amount, of course, so you can clearly see, which clients haven't had any sales with you, let's say since earlier in the year or early last year, and you can set the date range. And the filter is in that sales view in QBO. So I'll do a video on that soon enough, but check it out in the Between Wall and Main strategy forum because the screenshots there should be enough. And as always, if you need help with the pivot tables, you've got Matthew and myself who can easily help you with that stuff. We're both pivot table nerds, right? And you can even go back and search out on my YouTube channel the one that we did that was called Pivot Tables Gone Wild. Right?
I love that title. It was so much fun.
It was great. It was great. We'll have to do something like that again soon. So I'll try and check in on the live feed on Facebook for those of you who are watching there. Let me actually click over to the feed so I can monitor the comments there. Matthew, you've got it covered in terms of letting people in.
On it.
Right? And hang on 1 second.
We should do a video on X lookup as soon as I actually get it.
Sure. I don't have it yet either. So
that's because Google doesn't have it. Oh,
because Google doesn't need it.
Oh,
Google is so cool. It doesn't need X lookup. All right, there we are. I've got the live feed going on here on Facebook. So far, no comments. So if you're watching live on Facebook, feel free to comment. I probably won't see it, and I'll just ignore you. Just kidding. Just kidding. So actually, I do want to address some questions that people asked during registration. All right, the most important one actually is Matthew's question. Okay, Matthew asked a really deep question. I want you to think long and hard as I say this question out loud. Matthew wants to know how many, and by the way, before I actually get to this, because there's always a question of, is it Zapier or is it Zapier, right? And my logic on this is I create zaps, I don't create zapes, right? So I'm in the Zapier on Team Zapier, right? So Matthew's question is, how many zaps, not zapes, how many zaps does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? Right? And you could apply the same question
The
to
world may never know.
right, and you could apply the same question to a blow pop too, right? Because a Tootsie Roll or a piece of bubble gum, basically the same. Maybe the bubble gum's bigger, so it would take fewer zaps to get there. I don't know. Okay, now to the serious questions. Can Zapier be used to automate a process of transferring data from a spreadsheet to QuickBooks Desktop? The answer is no. I can't do anything with QuickBooks Desktop and Zapier. Zapier was built as a cloud-to-cloud connector, right? And I don't think you will ever see the day where Zapier is even trying to push anything into QuickBooks Desktop, right? So the moral of that story is get on the bandwagon with the rest of us who are all in with QuickBooks Online.
Tiffany was saying something, but she was
What?
muted.
She was saying QuickBooks Desktop is great. It's amazing.
I have nothing against QuickBooks
Sorry. Do
Desktop.
not put words in my mouth.
I was challenged to do so.
It's true.
I have nothing against QuickBooks Desktop. I have nothing against using a 10 key to add up numbers, except that I would never do it that way.
All right, let's stay on topic and help these amazing people who showed up here today.
Absolutely. So no, can't transfer data from anything to QuickBooks Desktop using Zapier. But actually, just quickly, what you could do if your specific concern is transferring data from a spreadsheet to QuickBooks Desktop is SaasAnt, the same company that I've been using for a while now to import data into QBO. I recently had occasion to work with Melissa, who's here with us today, in using the desktop version of SaasAnt to import data into a QuickBooks Desktop file, which of course happens from a spreadsheet, and it works beautifully. SaasAnt has done a beautiful job of creating an amazing desktop version of their app. So if that's what you're looking to figure out how to do, that's the way to do it. No question. SaasAnt for desktop will very nicely and easily allow you to map a spreadsheet for import into any transaction type into QuickBooks Desktop.
So you could create a Zap that gets you a spreadsheet that you could then.
Presumably, yes, but it would have to be a Google Sheet, which could then be exported to an Excel sheet, because Zapier won't push to Excel unless you have it in Office 365, which adds layers of complication in my experience to it. It would actually, I think, be easier to have Zapier push to Google Sheets and then download the Google Sheet as an Excel file. Matthew, any comments on that one?
Tons, but I'm going to let it go.
All right, give me the Cliff Notes version. Do you think there's an easy way to get data from Zapier into an Excel sheet?
I haven't tried it enough, so I don't
Okay.
know.
All right, my first thought is, and I challenge you, Matthew, to prove me wrong, is that it would be easier to go from, grab data using Zapier from whatever the source is, push it into Google Sheets, download that to Excel, and then use SaasAnt to import it into QuickBooks Desktop.
And Zaps are really trigger happy anyway. So it's not like unless you're doing it one at a time, it would get a little cumbersome.
Right, and that may be what she's trying to do is, create a process where she can add something to a spreadsheet and then it would automatically create the entry in QuickBooks, right?
Right.
Like one really good use case for that is you could have a spreadsheet for journal entries, right? And that way, if the data for the journal entries, like if you have to post whatever, monthly accruals, it could be a lot of things. For some people, it might actually be easier to just, lay that data out in a spreadsheet and then have Zapier pick it up. But again, to get it into desktop, it still wouldn't work for desktop, right? It would only work for QBO because, again, Zapier won't connect to a desktop file. So there's that. Anyway, next question was, how do we create Zaps for our clients with our Zapier account? So, this is a whole different conversation, which we could probably do a whole separate Zoom on how to provide the service of automating things for clients, where Zapier is kind of the core tool that we use for that purpose. But the quick answer that I have on that, and I'll certainly let other people chime in if you have any thoughts, is that first and foremost, if I'm providing the service, if I'm being hired by the client specifically to, automate things and create Zaps for them, then I wouldn't be inclined to do it in my own account. I would have them create an account with Zapier and invite me in so that I could work on their account and create the zaps. They're paying me to do it for them. It's not something I would want to keep, or even for that matter, hoard and keep from them if we parted company, because they're paying me to do it. If, on the other hand, they're hiring me to do their accounting and bookkeeping, and I'm using Zaps to make my life easier, then I would do it in my own account and not theirs. So I want to make that distinction clear. If the service I'm being engaged to provide is that of automating and creating Zaps, then you do it in their account. But if the service I'm being hired to provide is that of doing accounting and bookkeeping, and in that process I happen to be using Zapier to automate things, then it belongs in my account, my opinion, of course. And, and then if we parted company, they wouldn't get those Zaps necessarily, because those would be Zaps I would have created to help me do the bookkeeping, right? They could hire me to consult and somehow, recreate, or I don't think you can transfer Zaps from one account to another, but I could certainly recreate them easily enough. That would be an interesting concept, though, if I could transfer a Zap from one account to another. I haven't thought to even check that if such a thing exists. So I see, Matthew, I see your face. You're like, wheels are spinning.
Yeah, I think Heather was talking about that, but I think it has to be like a high level subscription for you to be able to do transfers of some sort.
Okay.
But generally, like what we'll do is we will use our account as a proving ground, because once we prove a Zap can work and the client will see the value of it.
So it's a sandbox, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Then we also get to keep the template if we have to reuse it, from that side. And then we do rebuild it in theirs once they see what we're doing with it, so they pay for it. It's off of our subscription.
Right. Right. And to that end, if you are using your own Zapier account to do things for clients, then if you haven't already seen this, you can create folders in your Zapier account to organize all that, right? And I already do that just for all of my own internal Zaps. But you could certainly create a folder for each client and then create that client's Zaps in that folder. I don't think you can do subfolders. Another thing I haven't thought to try because the need never arose. So you only get one level of folders. But still, it should probably suffice to have a folder for a client. Kelly, are you raising your hand?
I am. I just was going to put out there that you guys have kind of gone in the weeds already, and maybe it might be time to pull up. I mean, a lot of people, maybe everyone already knows how to use Zapier.
No,
but,
I'm aware, Kelly. We're just trying to answer the questions that people ask during registration, just kind of high level.
Okay. I just thought I'd mention, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. We haven't even looked at Zapier yet.
Yep, no, we're going to, I promise. Again, people, you can ask questions when you register. And so I've been addressing those questions. And one of the questions was more about providing the service of creating Zaps for somebody. So that's all. Now, I promise you, I'm very aware of the need to share my screen and actually demonstrate this stuff. And with that, I just want to check our live Facebook feed. Tammy says, I would like to know more about recreating a chart in Google Sheets or Excel using data from multiple sheets. Example, I want to take a daily timesheet and create a report to combine at the end of the workbook. Okay. So I'm not sure if that's a Zapier question or if it's more of a general spreadsheet question. I mean, I can imagine that one could create a Zap that might be able to do that. Again, you always have to think about, like Greg said earlier, what's the trigger going to be to determine now is the time to move that information from one spreadsheet to another. Which, by the way, and just a quick side note, and then I promise I'll share my screen and we'll get into this. Smartsheet has a whole workflow area which works very much like Zapier, but just internal to Smartsheet. And the question that Tammy asked reminds me of one of the newer features that Smartsheet has added, which is that you can build a workflow where you can say, you can create a trigger that says, let's say, for example, when this row is marked complete, move this row from one Smartsheet to another. Right? So that you can have a separate sheet with the completed items versus the active ones. So anyway, something to think about, food for thought. And Tammy just confirmed it's not really a Zap question. It was more of a spreadsheet question. Okay, let's do this. So a couple of things real quick. Today is meant to be an introductory sort of lesson on Zapier, right? Because, and where this came from, I mentioned it earlier, is I still have a lot of people, like even in our 97 and up group, who are telling me, I haven't really gotten into Zapier yet. I know it's something I need to get into and learn. And so I thought, for the sake of those who haven't really gotten into it yet, I wanted to create and demonstrate examples of some simple Zaps that we can do. The idea is just to get you started, to stimulate your thought process, and just bear in mind that what I'm going to do today is going to be very simple, And of course, you can get infinitely more complicated with what you can do with Zapier than what I'm going to show today. And I will certainly do some other Zooms on Zapier. But another thing, probably for the most classic use case that I can offer you right away, or let's just say after today's Zoom, is probably the most common first use case that I've seen that any of us in the accounting world want to do with Zapier is to automate the onboarding process. And I have a course that teaches you how to do exactly that. The course is normally $300. So at the end of today, I'm going to give you a coupon code so you can get 50% off that and basically get the course for $150, lifetime access. So at the end of today's session, I'll give you the coupon code. I'll also email it out to everyone, you know, who's on my list there with the coupon code. So today we're going to learn something very simple. Then the course is a perfect way to see very quickly how to take it to the next level, because it's going to show you how to create a form. It's going to give you a choice of 3 different products you can use for that purpose and teach you how to create the forms in each, and then how to use Zapier to start off based on a trigger of when that form is filled out and how to do all the things you want to set up completely automatically, right? Including adding them as a customer in your QuickBooks online company. So I just wanted to point that out, that that's going to be available, and it's a perfect complement to what we're about to do today to sort of take things to the next level. The other thing I want to mention real quick, and then I promise you I will share my screen and jump in, is recently a lot of people have been coming to me saying, hey, you know, I don't necessarily need a 1-hour session with you, but I would like to pick your brain from time to time and ask you questions. And so what I've been offering along those lines, in case anybody's interested, is a Slack support plan, is what I call it, where you and I will have a dedicated Slack workspace. We will organize it with channels, and you can ask me questions all day long, and I can respond to them within 24 hours and post screenshots. And what I've been doing is, for those who do want a one-on-one remote session, I've been including that at a discount. So basically, you sign on for the first month of that Slack support. It's $500. That includes a 1-hour session plus the first month of the actual Slack support plan, and then it's $250 a month thereafter for the ongoing Slack support. Unlimited, ask me all the questions you want. I'll always get back within 24 hours, post screenshots, whatever you need to help get your questions answered. Okay, now let's talk Zapier. I have a few kind of examples of things I want to show you how to do using Zapier. I'm just going to get on my other screen here and get the right tabs open. Okay, and obviously I'm going to assume we can all figure out how to get an account with Zapier, so I'm going to spare you the sort of boredom of showing you how to sign up for Zapier. I assume you can all fill out a form, right? Sorry if that sounds snarky. And so now what I want to do, and this is going to give you a little bit of a taste of what I was just talking about, is let's create something in Airtable. Right, so we're going to use Airtable. So this is going to be Zap, whoops, intro, right? I'll just call it that. Because the first kind of example I figured I'd show you is how to create a very simple form, right? And then use a Zap that says, take the data that was submitted in that form and, you know, put it wherever. We'll just stick it in a Google Sheet for now, right? Because once you understand the process of how to put these things together, it starts to be very easy to think in terms of how to swap. If I'm showing you how to move it into a Google Sheet, you can obviously figure out how to move it anywhere else that you might want to. Right? And that's kind of how I want you to be thinking about this stuff as I'm doing it. So notice I've already got a folder. I mentioned there are folders. You can see I even have some clients in here where I've got client-specific Zaps for different workflows. So here's the Zoom in with Seth demo folder, right? And to create a folder over here, you just hit the plus sign next to here where it says private folders, and you can name your folder. Again, pretty straightforward. Right? So first, before we can start creating the Zap, I need to have the trigger set up properly, right? The trigger, when you're creating a Zap, there has to be a trigger. Some event needs to take place that you can draw on and say, when this happens, start the workflow, right? That's what your trigger is. It's the very first step in your Zap. So in this case, the trigger is going to be when somebody submits this form I'm about to create in Airtable, right? And we're going to keep it real simple. So, well, let's say we just want to take name, and I'm going to insert a field to the left here in Airtable, and we'll have email, and then another field to the left, and we'll do phone. Right, in Airtable, we can have specific fields for a lot of these kind of things, like a phone number and even the email. So it kind of knows it's looking for something. And we can even do notes. We'll just call it comments, is usually what you'd call something like this on a form. Okay, and then I can pretty much come in here in Airtable and click on the form option, and it basically just converts that into a form, right? So now I have the infrastructure that I could share this. I'm not going to get too deep into this because that's not the purpose of today's lesson, but rest assured, as you can see, you can make it pretty, add a cover image, a logo, and all that kind of stuff. I just need the fields in place so I can build the Zap. Okay, so now we're going to go to Zapier. And when I click Make a New Zap, the first thing, of course, it's going to ask me for is the trigger, right? When this happens. They try and make it in, in plain and simple English. So when this happens, so the first thing I have to do is tell it what app I'm actually using for the trigger. So I'll start typing Air, and sure enough, there's Airtable. And if you haven't already added the app, of course, it'll give you the option to add the app to your Zapier account. And once you've chosen the app, it will contextually give you what the options are in terms of what a trigger event can be. And I want to stop here and point something important out, that this is often where I get ideas for Zaps that I can do, because the first thing I look at, separate and apart from the use case I'm actually building this for, is I always wonder, what else could I do with this, right? And I have two choices as far as triggers go with Airtable. Either there's a new record, or there's a new record in a specific view. Now, that's Airtable language, right? But some of you may remember in the past, I have done Zooms, and I've definitely covered this in 97 and up, where I've got a process in Airtable where I have a database in Airtable that when I check something off, let's say a column that says Twitter, that causes that record to show up in a view that I've called Twitter, and that triggers a Zap that says when there's a new record in the Twitter view, I want you to take the information, and it's all mapped, of course, and push it into Buffer. And that's how I automate all of my social media postings, is with Zapier using Airtable and Buffer, right? So I wanted to stop here and kind of I want to get your minds going and thinking beyond just the specific use case here. And I want to sort of train you to think bigger. And as you're going through this, think, what else could I do with this, right? Today's use case, we're grabbing a form. So the trigger event is there's a new record, and we're going to define where that record is coming from next. Any questions so far? I know it's all pretty basic stuff. Okay, so now I'm going to choose my Airtable account, because of course I could have more than one, but I only do have the one. And then we're going to customize the record. So the first thing I have to do is the base is the bigger picture, here, what I've called Zapier intro, and then the table is just called table 1. All this obviously can be renamed. So the base, it's going to show me the list of bases that it sees in my account, right? But if I start typing Zapier here, it finds the Zapier intro base. So especially when you're going into an app where you have a lot of things in there, that search is huge. It will save you a ton of time. Once I've chosen which base it is, as long as I don't have a whole lot of tables, which I don't, it's easy to just find the one table that I'm working with, right? And don't worry, if you rename the table after setting this up, Zapier is smart enough to figure it out. If you notice, there's like a table ID here that's unique, and that's what Zapier is really looking at, right? So I can rename this to anything, and it'll still figure it out because it's using the table's ID number.
Hey, Seth, real quick, I just want to strengthen what you're saying. So what we're talking about is when you're using Zapier and you're creating a Zap, if you have make sure you have an example in mind in the source you're grabbing the data from. Even if you put a sample in there, when you know what that stuff is and you know the values that are in each of those fields, you will see that pop up when you're creating the Zap, and it helps you to understand what you're mapping.
Right, and thank you for reminding me. I'm actually going to fill out the form so that we do have that exact sample data for these next steps. All right, and then
and by base, it means what is the name of the Airtable?
So in Airtable, what you create is a base. So the whole bigger picture thing is a base, like a database, and then within each base, you can have lots of tables.
Okay, all right.
And then each table has records, right?
Yep.
All right,
Okay.
and going back to what Matthew was saying, it's important to actually fill out every field in your sample data, because you want to make sure every field has a sample, because as you're going to see in a minute, it makes it much clearer to see what the data is that you're grabbing, to make sure you've got the right thing and you're putting that in the right place wherever it's going next, right? I can probably even attach a file here real quickly just to make sure that we even have an attachment. Let me do that real quick. So I'm going to use, I have actually the registration report for today's webinar here. So I'm just going to attach that just to have an attachment there. Okay, and then I'll click submit. Okay, and then if I go back to here into the grid view, there's my results. The 3 blank lines it kind of starts you off with, you know, you can just delete at that point. The other thing is this can actually be formatted specifically for phone numbers. I think I did something wrong. 866-945-807.
That's a good point. Whenever you have data, if you can format it, and if you have the choice of how to format stuff, that
take the time.
Yeah. Well, you can still pull data in either way through Zapier, but what it will do is perhaps you can make sure it's cleaned up ahead of time.
Yeah.
So that can be a powerful suggestion.
Yeah. And so, yeah, to summarize, just take the time to format your data wherever possible, because it's only going to make your life easier later on. Okay, so now, and I wanted to do that before I did the next step here in Zapier, because the next thing it's going to do is when I hit continue, it's going to look into what I'm linking it to look for sample data. That's what it's going to want to do, right? So now, and that's exactly what it's asking me to do here. I can test and review or test and continue. Test and continue is what you would do if you're certain it's going to be very simple and straightforward, and I really don't need to review it. Obviously, test and review means I want to take a look at it before I continue. So especially if you're new to this, always just do test and review, because you'll see in a second it's going to pull in any recent records it can find. In this case, it's just the one. But when I expand this, notice it has everything. And this is why it's important to use every field in your form on something like this, so that every field has some kind of a sample data, right? And so it's got my name, it's got my comments, right? It's got the ID, don't worry about that, the phone number, email, and it has the information about the attachment, right? So bottom line, it all looks good. I'm going to click Done Editing. And now the question is, what do we want to do with this information, right? And there's lots of things we could do, but anywhere that you could conceive of wanting to, have this data go, you could do. I mentioned earlier in my onboarding course, among other things, I teach you how to take contact information like this, a lot more detailed, but push that in and create the customer in QBO. That's a little more complex than what I want to cover today. And I'm not sure that there would be, I can't think of a reason off the top of my head why you would want to take data in Airtable and stick it in a Google Sheet, but just to teach you the steps of how to build this stuff, that's what I'm going to do for this one. And I have a few other examples we're going to run through, throughout the rest of the hour, right? So, and it's, again, the main thing I want you to get out of this is not the actual use case of taking data from Airtable and sticking in a Google Sheet, but I want you to understand the process of mapping the stuff and understand how you can either statically or dynamically grab data and push it through somewhere. And I'll explain what I mean by static versus dynamic, right? Static means very specific. I don't want to grab the data from anywhere else. Just always put this piece of information in. It's static, it's text, it's whatever. It's always going to be the same thing. Dynamic means, as you'll see in a second, I'm going to grab some piece of information from a prior step, which in this case, we just have the one with Airtable. So when this happens is the trigger, and when this happens, then we do this, right? So let's just, Google Sheets happens to be at the top here, so we'll just use that. Okay, and then we're gonna create a spreadsheet row, which means I need a new spreadsheet. So let's just go sheets.new. I hope you all know that trick by now. I've shown it many times. Sheets.new, when you can type properly, will actually create a new Google Sheet. And I'm just going to title this Zapier Intro. And if you are building this from scratch like this, you do want to take the time to name these things. As you're going to see in a second, it's going to make it much easier to find from within Zapier. Okay, so Google Sheets, we're going to create a spreadsheet row. And the reason it was important to stop there and go create it is in the next step, it's going to ask me where is the Google Sheet that I'm doing this in, right? So I'll click Continue. Okay, I have to choose. I have multiple Google accounts linked up to Zapier. Actually, it looks like I have a duplicate of the same one, which is funny, but I'll just pick one and click Continue. Okay, so customize the spreadsheet row. So where does the spreadsheet reside? Here, I'm going to tell it where the spreadsheet is. I'm going to skip that first step because I've already established where the spreadsheet is. And here it is. And it's smart. It looks for recently created documents from Google Drive. So it's right at the top because I just created it, right? But obviously, if I wasn't, I would just type Zapier because that's what I've named it. So, and as you can see, it's also helpful if you're going to be building something like this to have the sort of related documents and things that are involved in the steps open and available, right? It just saves you the time of having to search for things, okay? And then it wants to know what worksheet. It's just going to be sheet 1. Obviously, normally I would have had the sheet fleshed out with the proper headings and so on. So sheet 1 is the only choice there. And it says to continue, finish required fields. What did I miss? Oh, it says we didn't. So it's flagging me that there's no headers in the spreadsheet. So we'll just do it real quick. Name, email, phone, comments, attachments. Name, email, phone, comments, attachments. Okay. And watch what we're going to be able to do with the attachments. It's actually pretty slick. All right, so let's refresh fields. And I love that because Zapier is very forgiving. It lets you, in a click, say, okay, I've added what you need, and then click that button. And now it says, okay, great, now I can see this stuff, right? So static versus dynamic, right? Static would be, I just say, always put the name Seth David in here, right? That's static. It means it's never going to change. It's always going to do the same thing. Dynamic means I'm going to click this little plus sign here, which is which is Zapier's way of saying, all right, tell me where from a prior step I'm going to grab this piece of information. And now you're going to see why it's so important to have the sample data completely fleshed out when you're setting this up. Because when I click this option, there's only one prior step, which is the Airtable one. If there were more prior steps, it would list them each because I can grab the data from any prior step that I wanted to. And so the first thing is the name, and this makes it really straightforward. I'm going to use the name to get the name, right? The name that was submitted in Airtable is what I want to be the name in the Google Sheet. Same thing with email. And the sample data, as you can see, just makes this really easy and clear. Okay, and then we'll do the same for the phone. And for the comments. Now, it creates a lot of these other kinds of ways of referencing things. So just don't let yourself get overwhelmed by that. If you don't understand it, ignore it. You probably don't need to worry about it. That's kind of my rule on this. And over time, you'll start to get the hang of what these things actually, can do in some cases. So if you start getting lost in it like this, just use the search. I need my comments. There's my comments, and there's my sample text. Hi, Mom. So now I'm certain that it's actually grabbing the comment that was submitted in the form. Let me look at the chat. I just saw it light up. So Matthew
I'm just
says,
adding extra notes in.
Oh, adding a tag into a CRM. Exactly. Yep. Okay, and then here's what we're going to do for the attachments. I can't pass a file into a spreadsheet like Google Sheets, but I can certainly pass the reference. So I'll start typing attachments in the search, right? And the attachments URL. What that will do is create a URL in the spreadsheet that I can click on and access the attachment. Of course, I'll need to be logged into my Airtable account in order for that to work. All right, but we're going to click continue. Okay, we can test and review. So that's what we'll do. All right, and so it shows me the record. It's the same information. This is essentially what I'm passing through. This shows you that it's where in the spreadsheet it's going. Column E, column D, column C, and so on, right? Then, of course, I can click right over here and see that the data just dropped in when it tested it. Let's widen up these columns so we can read the data more clearly. And sure enough, if I click on this link, it will take me into actually, oh, interesting. So it takes me to download the file in that case. If it was an image file that I had attached, it probably would take me to a screen where I could view it. And again, I haven't checked, but I'm assuming I would need to be, since I'm logged into my Airtable account, as I'm doing this, it works. If I wasn't logged into Airtable, I would probably get a message saying I needed to log into Airtable to access that, because I'm pretty sure Airtable locks that stuff down. Okay, and assuming this is the final step in the Zap, and for today's purpose, we're not going to do much more than 2 steps on each, because again, I just want you to get the hang of creating simple Zaps, a trigger and something to do, right? Because you can always increase that once you get comfortable with it. So once we're done editing, first of all, up here at the top, we can name the Zap. So I would call it sample Airtable to Google Sheets. And by the way, it just occurred to me what a use case might be for this. I might like Airtable for grabbing the data internally, but for collaborating, Airtable can get expensive. So a Zap like this might be a great way to drop it into Google Sheets, which can easily be shared with people for free, right? So there's your use case. And then always, I've made this mistake many times and then wondered why my Zap wasn't running. You have to turn the Zap on. It will not turn on automatically for you. Okay, and so now that's done. If I click up here to back up, there's my Zap, sample Airtable to Google Sheets. Okay, let me just check on questions, and then I'm going to run through. I wanted to go through that one nice and slow. I'm going to run through the other ones a little more quickly. Obviously, you'll have today's recording within a day or two that you can use to review this stuff. The live feed on Facebook will be available right away. So let me just check on the Facebook page feed here. A key frame is to consider while watching is you can do the same exact thing we're doing here in Google Sheets or Excel. Each line of data could be used to trigger a Zap to move that data to another application. Right.
Just again, comments that were I was trying to feed into Zoom, I was putting into Facebook. So just trying to be helpful.
Okay. And Greg, I assume I should not share that comment publicly. But
Probably not.
We'll just leave it at that. Yeah, and so Matthew, just real quick, because I'm sure others are wondering, how would one get a Zap like this to push into Excel? I assume you'd have to have it in Office 365 and then you could access it that way?
Again, sorry if that was confusing. I haven't actually ever tried pushing into Excel. I've always pulled from Excel. So if there's a new line added into Excel, you can that can be the trigger that you can then use to all types of applications. My goal was to just try to highlight the fact that Airtable is an amazing application, but there's a large population out there that don't use it. So the things we're doing, once you set up your Airtable and structured it a certain way, each line of data that you have in that Airtable, it's just as if it was in a Google Sheet or Microsoft Excel.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
You need those to trigger and push that data to another application.
And again, if I wanted to use Excel as the app in the trigger step, I would need a way to access it through Zapier. So what I just did here, just to confirm, is I clicked up here in apps. This is where you can explore what apps are available. And I started typing Excel, and sure enough, there it is. Obviously, it has to be cloud-based Excel, which means it's got to be Office 365.
Correct.
Right, no question. All right, so let's go back.
I have a quick question, just to confirm. So this is really just data to data. Any either source or destination formatting is done by hand. Like, you do that yourself, and it just dumps the data into it. So what came to mind is if you have data that's going into a field and you say you didn't have the wrap text feature activated for the spreadsheet, is there a way that it would actually, expand the column to fit the data that's going to be inserted into it? Like, is that programmable through this process?
No, you would just do it the way I did it here, which is you highlight the whole spreadsheet and double click between any two columns, and that auto sizes the columns to make sure everything fits.
However, on a flip side, so that you cannot do that, but there is formatting that can be done, which would definitely be an intermediate or advanced class. But using an example of like a timestamp or a date stamp, you can have a universal timestamp, which is not a traditional US-based time format. And you do have a formatter that you can use as it's going through a Zap. You can format data and then push in that formatted data. But that's an advanced or definitely higher level thing that could be another video.
Right. And the perhaps simpler answer would be to just make sure the formatting is set up the way you need it in the destination. Right? It doesn't matter. The source is going to get pulled as generic text so that when you push it into any destination, it's going to come in formatted based on that destination's formatting that you've applied, right? So if I had a date in here, you could actually easily add in a date created field in Airtable where it will automatically timestamp when the entry was created. And if I was having that come in here at the end, I would simply make sure that this column, as far down as I felt I needed to go, has the right date formatting, right? So in Google Sheets, it's under the number formatting, and then I can do date and time or more formats, more date and time formats. So you can customize your date formatting as using the date as the example in the destination where the data is ultimately going. And that way, when it drops in, it will conform to that formatting. Because again, Zapier, when it grabs it, regardless of the formatting in the source, it's only grabbing the generic text version of that data. It's not grabbing formatted data. So wherever you push it, if that destination's formatting has been applied, it will adopt that formatting. Okay, so I want to get into another use case. I'm looking on Facebook. I don't see Matthew. It looks like you're keeping an eye on that, so you'll let me know if there's any questions. All right, so next example I wanted to do is something I actually do a lot with my clients. So a lot of you know I'm a big fan of the app Billbeez, right? And one of the things I've done in Zapier with each of my clients is I will create a Zap that says, so if let's say a client copies me on an email that's got a bill attached to it, I could easily forward it into, to the Billbeez email, right? But for whatever weird reason, I found it's easier, and I just prefer to have a Zap set up where I assign the label, and then it automatically forwards the email into Billbeez for me, right? And a lot of times this is easier for this. I'm going to, in the next Zap after this one, I'm going to show you another similar process that I do with clients that's actually just easier for the clients to do. But again, today's goal is just to show you how to create simple Zaps. So I'm going to make a new Zap. Let's call this email to Billbeez, because once I email the bill to Billbeez, Billbeez will read the attachment and actually code most of the data for me. The only thing I have to do is code the expense account after that. All right, so the email to Billbeez, the trigger is going to be Gmail, right? It's going to be when I assign this label in Gmail. So I'll click that. And then the trigger is new labeled email, right? Meaning when I assign a label to the email, this is what I want you to do. Continue. And then it needs to know which of my Gmail accounts I want it to use. So I'm going to use this one. Okay, and then here I need to tell it which label are we looking for. So it's knocking on Gmail's door. It's looking for my labels. And I know for my own stuff, I have a label that's just called Billbeez. So when I assign the Billbeez label in my own email, it's my own bill that's going to my Billbeez account. So you obviously need to do a separate one of these for each client, but I'll show you when we're done building this one how easy it is to clone it, so you can just go in and edit the label, right? And that's what makes this so slick. So I'll click continue. All right, I'll test and review. It's going to look for any recent examples of something that was labeled. Let's see what we got. So it looks like this is actually a perfect example, because this is a Verizon Wireless bill, which I did label Billbeez. All right, so I'll come in here and I'll say done editing. And then the answer is do this. Now the second step is also Gmail, because now what I want it to do is I'm going to give it an email address to forward that email to. So the trigger is Gmail, and the next step is also Gmail. In other words, when I label it Billbeez, forward the email. That's essentially what we're going to do. So we're just going to say send an email. It's not actually forwarding, it's just sending an email. But you'll see we're going to, how we're going to set this up. It'll be pretty clear. I'll say continue. Again, I have to tell it which of my Gmail accounts I want to do this with. And then customize the email. So here's an example of where we're going to do something with static text. I need my Billbeez email. Let me log in and grab that real quick.
Seth, do you have a different email for each of your clients in Billbeez?
Billbeez does that. When you create a Billbeez account for a company, it assigns a unique email to that company. That's kind of the whole core of how Billbeez is set up to work. Rather than fetching, they give you a system that, and this is my sort of rhetoric on this, that always works, because I can always forward an email to an email address, whereas fetching has proven to fail a lot.
Well, and HubDoc and Receipt Bank do that too. So my question is, each client has their own specific email. So if you label this Billbeez, and all your clients are doing Billbeez, how does it know which client email
Because
address?
like I said, you would have to create a different Zap and a different label for
Okay.
each client's Billbeez.
Got it. Okay, I missed that part.
Yeah, because each one of these is going to go to that specific email, right?
That's it. You have to label each client's Billbeez. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, and that's why once I'm done building this, I'm going to show you how to clone it so that the only thing you'll have to do is update the label and update the email address that it's going to.
Perfect. I missed that part. That makes great sense.
No worries. All right. Now, again, there's a lot of optional stuff in here I'm not going to bother with, but absolutely when you're doing something like this, you should go through it nice and slow. Take the time, look at every single option you have, because like I said earlier, separate and apart from what you're doing here, doing that will give rise to other thoughts and ideas about other things you can do with this stuff. That's how I get ideas, is I look at what my options are and I start thinking, okay, what else can I do with this? What else can I automate? Right? That should be the first thing you ask yourself every day when you wake up, when you're kind of diving into this world, is what can I automate today, right? And anytime you find yourself doing something that all of a sudden feels repetitive, like there's got to be a better way, that's when it's time to start thinking about how can I automate this with something like Zapier, right? It's forwarding to Billbeez, so I don't care about who it's coming from or any of that stuff. Now the subject, I might like to be specific, so oftentimes I'll just say new bill from, and so that's the static part, and then I can add in something dynamic, right? And I can just grab something like the from name, new bill from, in this case it's going to say from Verizon, right? And I can have it CC or BCC myself. When I'm doing this for clients, I often have it CC the email that I've set up internally for that client. As many of you know, I always set up a Google group for each client. It'll be client name at nerdenterprises.com. And so I'll often CC that email address when I'm doing this for a client, right? Again, I don't care about the body or any of that. It's going to Billbeez. I do certainly want the attachment, right? So, because that's going to be the bill. So I'm just going to say all attachments, right? Just so all attachments get forwarded into Billbeez if they're there.
So that means literally if there was multiple attachments on a single email, it would capture all attachments?
It would appear so, yeah.
That's cool.
Apparently I've missed a required field somewhere.
Body.
Oh, body is required. Interesting. Okay. So it doesn't matter. Nobody's reading this, so.
Hi.
Hi, Mom. I say hi to my mom a lot in these things. All right, now I can continue.
So do I. Hi, Mom.
All right, and this time I'm just going to say test and continue. There's really nothing to review on this. But like I said, if you're just starting out, you always want to test and review. So now that I've completed that step, it actually prompts me to turn the Zap on, or I can go back to setup if I want to add additional steps. All right, and then we'll go to my Zaps. And if I go into my sent items in my email, we will see the test that just got sent out. And I'll show it to you on screen here. Right, so there it is. It came from me. It goes to my Nerd Enterprises Inc. at Billbeez. And there were no attachments in this case. So I forget how Billbeez handles that, but I'm not sure if it can tell if there's a link to a bill, but it can't get the link. So in a case like that, this wouldn't be actually effective. So anyway, now you know how to build something like that. Let's go to the next one. Matthew.
What I'm hoping is that more and more vendors, I have some that have PDFs they attach, and it would be great to kind of spread the word and just the business community about how helpful it would be if they would include a PDF in every email they would send instead, so you can actually do these types of things more easily.
Yeah, it's unfortunately not necessarily even always within their control. Like Verizon doesn't send me an attached bill. It sends me a link so I can log in and get the bill, which I'm sure they do for security, right? So it's a good idea, Kelly, but I guess my comment is it's probably easier said than done. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, I think there are a lot more that could do it that they probably just don't even think about it, honestly. So anyway, it's just a food for thought for getting the message out.
Yep.
So
and actually this next Zap I want to show you would be a way to actually solve for that. And this is what I've done. I have a client who's a personal injury attorney, and he has an assistant who's a little bit more tech savvy than him, but between the two of them, not very tech savvy at all, right? And so in my view, the fewest number of steps possible, the fewer steps, the better. And so rather than have him, they get a lot of bills in paper form, so he has to scan them, right? So when I first started working with them, I made sure they had a good scanner, and I set up the following process that I'm going to show you for these guys. So we're going to make a new Zap. And basically what I said to them is as follows. I set them up in Google Drive. I set up an inbox in Google Drive for them, and I said, I want you to scan the bills and just log into Google Drive. I've got this shared folder, and you're going to drag the bill into this Google Drive folder. And then what I did is what I'm about to show you. I'm going to create a Zap that says when a new file is put into this Google Drive folder, email it to Billbeez. And that might be a way, Kelly, of solving for that, where instead of giving them the option to just forward an email, you say, no, I need a copy of the bill dropped into this folder, and then Zapier can take it from there. So I'm going to say Google Drive is the trigger. Right, new file in folder. And again, that's how I figured out this workflow, because I noticed that there was an option here in a Google Drive trigger for when there's a new file added in. If it says in folder, that means I'm going to be able to specify the folder.
And very, very important, though, while you're talking about that, it's a specific folder and does not include subfolders.
No, I do this in a subfolder. Oh, it won't include if something's, yeah, it has to be dropped into that exact folder. The inbox folder that I create for this purpose is in itself a subfolder of the client's folder, right? And yeah, so it has to, but I only give the client access to upload to that one folder, right? And then what I'll do, at first my plan was to then kind of rename those files and move and organize them. I ended up not doing that because it ends up serving as a really nice archive of everything they've ever uploaded. So at some points there have been questions like, hey, this bill didn't get paid. And I'd say, well, you never dropped it into Google Drive. And so I didn't have the bill, so I didn't know about paying it. And this folder, having left it the way it is, it serves as the proof that they didn't actually give me the bill. All right, so now again, I don't need to, it could be my Google Drive, but I don't want to do that.
We're hitting real close to 9 o'clock, Seth, just
yeah,
so
I
you
know.
know. So.
I'm almost done. All right, so the folder I'm going to choose. Now you have to do this one folder at a time. So the first level is going to be Nerd Enterprises, Inc. Once it's got that, I can click this drop down again, and it will show me the subfolder. So this part can be a bit of a pain in the neck, right? But then I can go and search clients. So there's my clients active folder. Okay, and then again, I can click in here. And so each time you can go within the folder that you've chosen. So I'm going to actually use this client. His name is Ira. He's a lawyer. And then in here, I'm going to choose, and I just remembered I forgot to show you how to clone those zaps. So I'm going to show you that next, and then we'll finish. So here's his inbox. It's Ira Fearberg inbox. So continue. I'll test and review. All right, it found a file that they uploaded. Okay, it was an Edison bill. And so then I can say done editing. And now we're going to do this. And again, this part's easy. It's just Gmail. We're going to send an email. Using my Gmail account. All right, the 2 is going to be the Billbeez email address that was still on my clipboard. The subject is going to be new bill from Ira. The body is going to be, hi, Mom. Okay, and then the attachments we need. So we need attachments. Wait. I'm sorry. It's going to be the actual file. That's the attachment, right? Continue. And then if I do test and review, it should find that bill. And I'm sure if I go into his Google Drive folder, it will be there. Okay, so I'll turn the Zap on. Now it's running. Okay, I'm actually going to turn that one off because that is a redundancy, based on the actual one that I do for him. So this one I hadn't named yet, but that's how you can solve for a problem, Kelly, like what you just described, so that you're kind of forcing them to always deal with the actual bill instead of forwarding emails, which may or may not have the attachment.
And can you just summarize that first section of the Zap? Like what did you identify that, like how did you get it from the link to a download file? You had to physically do that piece?
The trigger was that they dropped the file in that specific Google Drive folder. And so that's the trigger. So then in the email forward, I chose that file to be the attachment in the email that's being sent to Billbeez.
But that, so it hasn't addressed like being able to identify how to click a link. You know, you can't go to click a link, download the file. Like it won't do that.
No, there's no way to do that in Zapier. That would be asking way too much of the app. Plus, it would normally require a login beyond clicking the link, which Zapier wouldn't have, right? I mean, that would be amazing technology if you can actually feed it logins and say, go log in and grab the file. That would be like Zapier meet HubDoc, but then we have all the same problems like multi-factor authentication. Anyway, real quick, so to clone this, because a lot of times you're going to create something like this and you're going to want to reuse it, like the email to Billbeez. In this dropdown, you simply click copy. And then once you've copied it, so obviously you're going to name this to make sure you know which one is for which client. And then you would just go in and edit the steps. And so in here, you would customize the labeled email. So you would change it. So if it was for a client's Billbeez, it would probably be client name -Billbeez would be the label that I would choose here, right? And then the email address that it's sending to, which is in this step, I would also have to update to that client's Billbeez email address instead of my own, right? So you would clone it, then make those 2 quick edits, and then make sure you rename it so that the client's name is somewhere in there, so you know this is the Zap for that purpose for that client, and then you would turn it on and you're off and running, right? Another one that I've done that I don't have time to get into, but you can. One thing that I've done that I've been using a lot lately is I've got a Zap that says anytime I star a message in Slack, add that as a task in ClickUp, and it grabs all the information about that Slack message, because I often forget to follow up on the things I've starred, but this puts it in my actual to-do system, right? So now I have a task in ClickUp that reminds me, and it has the link in the body of the ClickUp task that I can click on that takes me right back to that exact Slack message. So I can get back and have the full context and reply if I need to. So that's another really cool use case. Simple Zap to build, right? The trigger is new start message in Slack. And then the next thing and only thing to do is then add it as a task in ClickUp. And then as you've seen how to do already in the existing examples, you know, it's pretty easy to decide how to grab what information I want to grab from the Slack message and how I want to put that into the task in ClickUp, right? Another one that I saw that I started playing around with actually just yesterday is a Zap that says I created a dedicated folder in Google Drive for this, and anytime somebody emails me an attachment, it will drop it into this folder in Google Drive. It just saves me the trouble of having to download it, and I can just go through that. You know, if I know I just got an email with an attachment that I want, then I can actually go into that folder and find that attachment, rename it, route it however I want to route it. It saves me the step of clicking into the email and clicking to download that attachment, right? So I'm going to play with it and see if I actually find it useful. If I do, then I'll stick with it. If I don't, then I'll scrap it, right? And a lot of times that's how I do these things, is I play around with it and test it and see if in the final analysis it actually does save me time, right? That's the name of the game at the end of the day. So I promised you at the beginning of the hour that if you want the Automate onboarding course, which like I said, gets into detail on, you know, how to do a lot of this. I'll show you real quick before we end. It's normally $297. The coupon code is the word automate. Just put in the word automate. Here's the coupon code. It will give you 50% off. And you can see right here in the checkout screen what it's showing you. Step 1, you're going to actually use Dynalist to sketch out all the information. We're going to plan this, right? We're going to plan the onboarding process. Step 2, you're going to choose your weapon. We're going to teach you 3 different apps: Airtable, Smartsheet, or Google Forms. You pick which one you're going to want to use for this, and I have lessons for each. And you might go through all 3 lessons to decide which of these tools you like best for this purpose. And then step 3, we're going to zap everything to set up all of your services, right? So it's going to create the client in QuickBooks. It's going to show you how to add it to Nimble CRM. It's going to show you how to add them as a contact in MailChimp, which I don't use anymore. So I've since changed this over to Kajabi, but the course teaches you MailChimp. Most of you are probably using that or something like it. And then it also adds a step to add a task in ClickUp to remind you to set up anything else that you need to do. And there's more that actually got cut off in the screenshot. It's going to show you how I use it to create a workspace for every client in Smartsheet. and a series of other things that it's going to teach you. Once you have them filling out the form, you have the data you need. You can automate setting up every single service that you need set up for that client. I can even have it create all the Google Drive folders that I need for that client in Google Drive, and I believe that's actually covered in here. If not, it's a planned lesson that I'm going to add soon enough. So what do you call it? So the bottom line is, if you want this course, you can get it for half off. The coupon code is AUTOMATE. And if you want more kind of ongoing one-on-one type help with me, I have the Slack support plan that I can offer you. So just reach out to me or sign up for 97 and up if you're not already a member, because it's very easy in 97 and up to say, hey, Seth, I'd like to go over this. And we will add it onto the schedule, and we'll teach you how to use Zapier to do any very specific thing that you want to learn how to use it to do. So, and I'm just looking at the chat comments. Lisa says, I don't onboard that many clients, but I love these everyday workflow ideas. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, and even if you don't onboard a lot, it's just nice to know that you have a process like this in place so that even with the one client you might onboard, I don't have to worry about doing all this setup. It's easy to forget a step. It can be time consuming even for just one client. That's why I ultimately decided to automate this, you know. And another quick example, and then I'll let you all go, is the, my training and coaching process where people sign up for one-on-one with me. I've got that completely automated so that from the time somebody makes the payment to sign up for, say, a 5-hour plan, I don't have to do anything until the day and time of our session. In between, all my services have been set up. Their sessions they've purchased and the sessions they've scheduled are all logged in Airtable for me, and everything's automatically sent to them. The Zap that I have on this creates the Zoom meeting automatically, grabs that Zoom meeting info, you know, the meeting ID and the URL, and emails it to them, puts in a delay and emails it to them again at the exact time of our session so that I don't have that confusion of, hey, where's the information I need to log in? It completely automates that process, and that's actually the next course that I'm currently writing and working on, which should be out sometime next month. It will teach you how to completely automate your training or coaching business. So that's coming up soon too. So just let me know if you have any questions, what you need. Always here, always happy to answer them.
Awesome. For everybody still watching this, put a hashtag replay if you see this afterwards. Yay. And add your coolest zaps into the comments later on in Facebook. Cool?
Yeah.
Share, 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 share.
Yeah. Do that. What Matthew said.
Great suggestions. I love this. Great webinar today, if you want to call it a webinar.
Thank you.
Have a good one, guys. Time to go make some more money. Bye.
Bye.
Don't forget to automate something today.
Bye. I'll try it. Bye.
That's your homework. What are you going to automate?